The graveyards are filled with monsters who never emerged. The cemeteries are packed with greatness that was never expressed. The tombs contain brilliance that was never released. Why? Because these people were afraid of standing out. They were afraid of being criticized. Afraid of being misunderstood. They were afraid of becoming the monsters they were created to be. And now they're gone. And the world will never benefit from their gifts. The world will never experience their contribution. The world will never know what they could have been. Is that the legacy you want to leave? Is that the story you want told about your life? Or are you ready to embrace the monster within? You were not born just to fit in. You were born to stand out. Most people live their entire lives trying to be normal when they were created to be extraordinary. They spend their days fitting into boxes created by others when they were designed to break those boxes and create new ones. What happens when a seed refuses to break? Oh, nothing. It stays the same. But when that seed breaks through its shell, it transforms. It becomes something powerful. It becomes something others can't ignore. It becomes what I call a monster. Now, I'm not talking about the monsters in movies that scare people. I'm talking about the kind of monster that causes others to stop and pay attention. The kind of monster that changes environments. The kind that transforms landscapes. The kind that builds legacies. Look at your hands. Those hands were not given to you to be average. Those hands were not given to you to just get by in life. Those hands contain dominion. Those hands contain authority. Those hands contain the power to transform not just your life, but the lives of thousands, perhaps millions of others. But you've been taught to be small. You've been taught to dim your light. You've been taught that being a monster is bad. I want to change that thinking today. A monster is someone who refuses to accept what others call reality. A monster is someone who sees obstacles as opportunities. A monster is someone who understands that their purpose is bigger than their problems. When I talk about becoming a monster, I'm talking about tapping into your true potential. I'm talking about refusing to live within the confines of other people's expectations. I'm talking about becoming so good at what you do that people cannot ignore you. Most people fear standing out. They fear being different. They fear being criticized. But what they should really fear is reaching the end of their lives and realizing they never became who they were meant to be. You see, inside of you is a sleeping giant. Inside of you is untapped potential. Inside of you is a monster waiting to be unleashed. And the world needs that monster. Let me tell you something that changed my life. When I was a young boy growing up in the Bahamas, I was told I would never amount to much. I was told that where I came from determined where I could go. I was told that my background, my skin color, my economic status would limit what I could achieve. But one day, I made a decision. I decided that I would not allow other people's opinions to become my reality. I decided that I would not allow my background to determine my future. I decided that I would become a monster, not a monster that destroys, but a monster that builds, a monster that inspires, a monster that transforms. And that decision changed everything. It wasn't easy. It required sacrifice. It required discipline. It required doing what others were not willing to do. But that's what monsters do. They do what others won't so they can have what others don't. You know, I've traveled to over 80 countries. I have spoken to presidents and prime ministers. I've addressed the United Nations. I've written books that have touched millions of lives. But none of that would have happened if I had accepted the limitations others tried to place on me. None of that would have happened if I had been afraid to become a monster in my field. None of that would have happened if I had been satisfied with being good when I was created to be great. The problem with most people is not that they aim too high and miss. The problem is that they aim too low and hit. They settle for less than what they're capable of. They accept mediocrity when they were made for excellence. Becoming a monster means refusing to settle. It means pushing past the point where others quit. It means doing the hard work when no one is watching. It means staying committed to your vision even when others don't see it. There's a price for greatness. There's a price for becoming a monster in your field. And that price is paid in advance. That price is paid in the early mornings and the late nights. That price is paid in the rejection and the criticism. That price is paid in the lonely hours when you're working on your craft while others are relaxing. But here's what I know. The price of discipline weighs ounces, but the price of regret weighs tons. The temporary discomfort of hard work is nothing compared to the permanent discomfort of knowing you never became who you were meant to be. You see, comfort is the enemy of progress. Comfort is the killer of potential. Comfort is what keeps monsters from emerging. If you want to be comfortable, you'll never become a monster. If you want to be liked by everyone, you'll never become a monster. If you want to avoid criticism, you'll never become a monster. But if you're willing to be uncomfortable, if you're willing to be misunderstood, if you're willing to be criticized, then you can become the kind of monster that changes the world. The world doesn't need more normal people. The world is full of normal people. The world needs monsters, people who refuse to conform, people who push boundaries, people who challenge the status quo, people who make a difference. The world needs you to become a monster. Let me tell you a story. There was once a small island nation that was struggling economically. Resources were limited. Opportunities were scarce. The people had accepted their fate. They had accepted that this was just how things were. But there was one man who refused to accept this reality. One man who saw not what was, but what could be. One man who decided to become a monster. He started with what he had, a vision and determination. He began to transform the fishing industry on the island. He introduced new methods, new technologies, new ways of thinking. People criticized him. People mocked him. People said he was wasting his time. But he kept going. He kept pushing. He kept becoming more and more of a monster within 5 years. This man had not only transformed the fishing industry, but had created thousands of jobs. Within 10 years, he had helped turn the entire economy of the island around. Today, that island nation is prosperous. And it all started with one person who refused to be normal, who refused to accept limitations, who decided to become a monster. That's the power of one person who decides to tap into their true potential. That's the power of one person who decides to become a monster. And now, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying there won't be obstacles. I'm not saying there won't be times when you want to quit. But monsters don't quit. Monsters don't give up. Monsters don't surrender to circumstances. Fear is what stops most people from becoming monsters. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of criticism, fear of standing out. But here's the truth about fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real. Fear is an illusion. Fear is a liar. Fear is what keeps you trapped in mediocrity when you were made for excellence. When you face your fears, when you push through your fears, when you act in spite of your fears, that's when you start to become a monster. That's when you start to tap into your true potential. That's when you start to become who you were created to be. I remember when I first started speaking publicly, I was terrified. My hands would shake. My voice would quiver. My heart would race. But I knew that if I wanted to impact lives, if I wanted to fulfill my purpose, if I wanted to become a monster in the field of personal development, I had to push through that fear. So I did. I pushed through the fear. I pushed through the discomfort. I pushed through the anxiety. And with each speech, with each presentation, with each seminar, I became less afraid and more confident. I became less normal and more of a monster. Today, I can speak to thousands of people without notes, without slides, without fear. But that didn't happen overnight. It happened because I was willing to face my fears. It happened because I was willing to be uncomfortable. It happened because I was willing to become a monster. What fears are holding you back? What fears are keeping you from becoming a monster in your field? What fears are preventing you from fulfilling your potential? Identify those fears. Face those fears. Push through those fears, because on the other side of fear is freedom. On the other side of fear is fulfillment. On the other side of fear is the monster you were created to be. Becoming a monster isn't just about what you do. It's about who you become in the process. It's about the character you develop. It's about the mindset you cultivate. It's about the person you transform into. Monsters are not born. They're made. They're made through discipline. They're made through perseverance. They're made through sacrifice. They're made through constantly pushing beyond what's comfortable. Most people live their entire lives in their comfort zone. They never stretch. They never grow. They never challenge themselves. And as a result, they never become monsters. They never become who they were created to be. But you're not most people. You're reading this because there's something inside of you that knows you were made for more. There's something inside of you that knows you have untapped potential. There's something inside of you that knows you can become a monster in your field. So the question is not whether you can become a monster. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price to become one. The question is whether you're willing to do what others won't do so you can have what others won't have. The question is whether you're willing to sacrifice temporary pleasure for long-term fulfillment. Because that's what becoming a monster requires. It requires saying no to the good so you can say yes to the great. It requires saying no to distractions so you can say yes to your destiny. It requires saying no to mediocrity so you can say yes to excellence. The greatest tragedy in life is not death. The greatest tragedy in life is living without purpose. The greatest tragedy in life is never becoming who you were created to be. The greatest tragedy in life is dying with your potential still inside of you. When you die, the cemetery becomes filled with books that were never written, businesses that were never started, songs that were never sung, leaders who never led. The cemetery is the most valuable place on earth because it is filled with potential that was never released. I refuse to go to my grave full. I refuse to die with my potential still inside of me. I refuse to leave this earth without becoming the monster I was created to be. And I hope you make the same decision. You see, your life is not about you. Your life is about the contribution you make to others. Your life is about the problems you solve. Your life is about the value you add. And monsters understand this. Monsters don't just live for themselves. Monsters live to make an impact. Monsters live to solve problems. Monsters live to add value. When you focus on solving problems, when you focus on adding value, when you focus on making an impact, money follows. Success follows. Fulfillment follows. But if you focus just on making money, just on achieving success, just on finding fulfillment, you'll end up empty. That's the paradox of becoming a monster. Monsters don't chase success, they chase excellence. And success chases them. Monsters don't chase money, they chase value. And money chases them. Monsters don't chase fame, they chase impact. And fame chases them. Let me tell you about a young woman I met in South Africa. She grew up in a township, surrounded by poverty, surrounded by hopelessness, surrounded by limitations. But she refused to accept that as her reality. She refused to be defined by her circumstances. She refused to be anything less than a monster. With no resources, with no connections, with no advantages, she started teaching children in her community. She started with 5 children under a tree. 5 became 10. 10 became 20. 20 became 50. Today, she runs an educational foundation that has impacted over 10,000 children. She has raised millions of dollars. She has changed the trajectory of thousands of lives. And it all started because she refused to be normal. It all started because she decided to become a monster. That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of monster the world needs. That's the kind of monster you can become. But here's the key. She didn't wait until conditions were perfect. She didn't wait until she had all the resources. She didn't wait until everyone believed in her vision. She started with what she had, where she was. And that's what you need to do. You need to start with what you have, where you are. You need to use what's in your hand. You need to maximize the resources at your disposal. Most people are waiting for perfect conditions before they start. Most people are waiting for all the lights to turn green before they leave the house. But monsters don't wait for perfect conditions. Monsters create perfect conditions. Monsters don't wait for opportunities. Monsters create opportunities. I've discovered something powerful. Success is not about what happens to you. Success is about how you respond to what happens to you. Success is not about your circumstances. Success is about your decisions. You can't control everything that happens to you, but you can control how you respond. You can't control your circumstances, but you can control your decisions. And monsters make decisions based on their destiny, not their history. Monsters make decisions based on their future, not their past. Monsters make decisions based on their vision, not their current reality. Most people let their history determine their destiny. Most people let their past determine their future. Most people let their current reality determine their vision. But monsters do the opposite. Monsters let their destiny determine their history. Monsters let their future determine their past. Monsters let their vision determine their current reality. This is what I call the monster mindset. This is what separates those who achieve greatness from those who settle for mediocrity. This is what separates those who make an impact from those who merely exist. The monster mindset says, I don't care what happened yesterday. I don't care what failures I've experienced. I don't care what setbacks I've faced. Today is a new day. And I'm one step closer to becoming who I was created to be. The monster mindset says, I don't care what others think of me. I don't care what others say about me. I don't care what others expect of me. I'm not here to meet their expectations. I'm here to fulfill my purpose. The monster mindset says, I don't care how difficult it is. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how many times I fail. I will not quit. I will not give up. I will not surrender until I become who I was created to be. That's the mindset you need to develop if you want to become a monster. That's the mindset you need to cultivate if you want to make an impact. That's the mindset you need to embrace if you want to fulfill your potential. And here's the good news, this mindset can be developed. This mindset can be cultivated. This mindset can be embraced. It's a choice. It's a decision. It's a commitment. You can decide right now that you're going to develop the monster mindset. You can decide right now that you're going to stop making excuses and start making progress. You can decide right now that you're going to stop blaming others and start taking responsibility. Because monsters don't make excuses, they make progress. Monsters don't blame others, they take responsibility. Monsters don't complain about problems, they find solutions. One of the biggest obstacles to becoming a monster is what I call the approval addiction. The need to be liked by everyone. The need to have everyone approve of what you're doing. The need to avoid criticism at all costs. But here's the truth, if you want to be a monster, if you want to make an impact, if you want to fulfill your potential, you must be willing to be misunderstood. You must be willing to be criticized. You must be willing to stand alone if necessary. Every great leader, every great innovator, every great change maker throughout history was criticized. They were misunderstood. They were often rejected before they were accepted. But they didn't let that stop them. They didn't let that deter them. They didn't let that prevent them from becoming monsters. Martin Luther King Jr. was criticized. Nelson Mandela was criticized. Mother Teresa was criticized, but they didn't let criticism stop them from making an impact. They didn't let criticism stop them from fulfilling their purpose. They didn't let criticism stop them from becoming monsters. And you can't let criticism stop you either. You can't let the fear of what others might say or think prevent you from becoming who you were created to be. You can't let the approval addiction keep you in mediocrity when you were made for excellence. Break free from the approval addiction. Break free from the need to be liked by everyone. Break free from the fear of criticism. Because on the other side of that addiction, on the other side of that need, on the other side of that fear is the monster you were created to be. Another obstacle to becoming a monster is what I call the comparison trap. Comparing yourself to others. Measuring your progress against someone else's journey. Defining your success by someone else's standards. But monsters don't compete, they create. Monsters don't compare, they innovate. Monsters don't measure themselves against others, they measure themselves against their potential. You are not in competition with anyone else. You are in competition only with yourself, with the person you were yesterday, with the person you could be tomorrow. Your goal should not be to be better than someone else. Your goal should be to be better than you were yesterday. Your goal should be to be the best version of yourself. When you fall into the comparison trap, you lose your uniqueness, you lose your authenticity. You lose what makes you special. And monsters don't blend in, they stand out. Monsters don't copy, they originate. Monsters don't follow trends, they set trends. So break free from the comparison trap. Break free from measuring yourself against others. Break free from trying to be someone you're not. Because on the other side of that trap, on the other side of that measuring, on the other side of that trying is the monster you were created to be. The third obstacle to becoming a monster is what I call the comfort zone. The desire to stay where it's safe. The reluctance to try something new. The fear of the unknown. But growth never happens in the comfort zone. Transformation never happens in the comfort zone. Becoming a monster never happens in the comfort zone. Growth happens in the stretch zone where you're uncomfortable but not overwhelmed. Transformation happens in the stretch zone where you're challenged but not crushed. Becoming a monster happens in the stretch zone where you're pushed to your limits but not beyond your breaking point. So you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You need to embrace discomfort as a sign of growth. You need to see challenges as opportunities for transformation. When you feel uncomfortable, when you feel challenged, when you feel stretched, don't retreat. Don't go back to what's familiar. Don't return to what's comfortable. Push forward. Lean into the discomfort. Embrace the challenge. Because on the other side of that discomfort, on the other side of that challenge, on the other side of that stretching is the monster you were created to be. I want to tell you about a businessman I met in Singapore. He had built a successful company. He was making good money. He was respected in his industry by all conventional standards. He was successful. But he felt empty. He felt unfulfilled. He felt like there was more to life than just making money, than just achieving success by society's standards. He felt like he wasn't becoming who he was created to be. So he made a decision that many thought was crazy. He sold his business. He used the money to start a foundation that would address poverty in rural communities across Southeast Asia. He went from being a successful businessman to being a champion for the underprivileged. People criticized him. People questioned his sanity. People thought he had lost his mind. But he hadn't lost his mind. He had found his purpose. He hadn't gone crazy. He had gone purposeful. He hadn't made a mistake. He had made a decision to become a monster. Today, his foundation has lifted thousands of families out of poverty. It has provided education for countless children. It has brought hope to communities that had been forgotten. And he often says that he's never felt more alive, more fulfilled, more like himself than he does now. That's what happens when you decide to become a monster. That's what happens when you decide to live for something bigger than yourself. That's what happens when you decide to fulfill your purpose. It's not easy, it's not comfortable. It's not always understood by others. But it's worth it. It's fulfilling. It's what you were created for. So what's stopping you from becoming a monster? What's stopping you from fulfilling your purpose? What's stopping you from making the impact you were created to make? Is it fear? Is it insecurity? Is it the approval addiction? Is it the comparison trap? Is it the comfort zone? Identify what's stopping you and then make a decision to overcome it. Make a decision to push through it. Make a decision to break free from it. Because the world needs you to become a monster. The world needs your ideas. The world needs your passion. The world needs your contribution. The world needs your solution to the problems you see. The world needs the value that only you can add. Don't rob the world of your monstrosity. Don't deprive the world of your uniqueness. Don't withhold from the world the contribution that only you can make. Become a monster, not a monster that destroys, but a monster that builds, not a monster that tears down, but a monster that lifts up, not a monster that brings fear, but a monster that brings hope. Become a monster that makes an impact. Become a monster that solves problems. Become a monster that adds value. Become a monster that changes lives. Become a monster that transforms environments. Become a monster that builds legacies. That's your calling. That's your purpose. That's why you're here. And when you fulfill that calling, when you fulfill that purpose, when you become that monster, you'll experience a level of fulfillment, a level of joy, a level of peace that nothing else can provide. So don't settle for being normal when you were created to be extraordinary. Don't settle for fitting in when you were created to stand out. Don't settle for existing when you were created to live. Don't settle for surviving when you were created to thrive. Don't settle for being good when you were created to be great. Become the monster you were created to be. The world is waiting. The world is watching. The world is depending on you to become a monster.